Okay, so Jacob, I'm just going to take away your screen share there. So welcome to this, the penultimate, event of the Thursday, 27th of January, the day 4 schedule of the Love Tutoring Festival 2. It is currently 8 p.m. Here in the UK. So for those watching on demand, that's just to give you a little context about where this event is placed in the festival. Really, really important event here, I think, for, I guess what we'd say the next generation of tutors, but really, they're not really the next generation because they've probably been tutoring for a number of years already. And that is the kind of category of the class of undergraduate tutors and how they can, the power and the force that they have, the role that they have to play in the tutoring market. So to lead this charge, standing at the head of the vanguard is Jacob Kelly, who is the Executive Officer of Tutor the Nation. I'm sure you'll be hearing a little bit more about how Tutor the Nation have been helping students over the course of the past few months, and prior to that, the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative. So the title of the event is Why Undergraduates Tutor. And as a brief introduction to Jacob, as I've just mentioned there, he has taken up the post of Executive Officer of Tutor the Nation, and Jacob's previous project was the hugely successful Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative, which itself was a charity that provided over 51,000 hours of free tutoring, a frankly extraordinary number, to disadvantaged students during the pandemic over the course of 2020. So in this crucial event for the huge body of undergraduate tutors in the UK that we've just been talking about, Jacob will, hopefully, no pressure, explain the how and the why behind deploying bright, motivated university students, and how it could be, should be, can be the key to unlocking the obstacles around scalability and accessibility in the tutoring market of today. So if you are, or if you work with an undergraduate tutor, then this is the event for you. Thank you for being here, live or on demand. So a huge thank you as well to Nudge Education, who have been faultless in their service of the Love Tutoring Festival vision and in partnering with us as lead sponsors, and also to Tutor Cruncher, who not only very capably helped chair the roundtables earlier today, that being Fionn Finnegan, the commercial director of Tutor Cruncher, but also have helped really to deliver the day 4 activities as a whole. So as Jacob was just doing while this recording started, I will allow Jacob to reshare his screen and start off in this event.
Amazing. I am presuming that everyone can see my screen at this stage, I hope.
Yes, all good.
Great, okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Ludo, for that introduction. No pressure at all after that very, very kind introduction. But hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this talk. I think as Ludo described, my plan really and my hope is to talk to all of you a little bit about the value of undergraduate tutors, because I think there are often some misconceptions about undergraduate tutors and some fears maybe about working with them, especially if you're sort of at the first stage of starting a tutoring business. It might be a bit scary to put your faith in sort of 18, 19-year-olds. But really, I'm hoping to draw forward some of the real positives of working with those undergraduates. Just bear with me for 2 seconds while I've got someone knocking on my door. Sorry, the joys of working in a shared office. So I'm really hoping to sort of share some of those benefits of why it's, I think, sensible and really beneficial to work with undergraduates. And the intention really is to give a lot of time for discussion, and where we're getting to the end of this Thursday now. So there's only a few of us here, so we'll have some discussions, but please don't feel forced to discuss. I've really got lots of opinions and thoughts to share myself as well. So in terms of what I'm planning to talk about today, first of all, and hopefully interestingly, I'm going to talk a little bit about my work, both with the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative and then with Tutor the Nation, which I think Ludo sort of alluded to there at the start of this session. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've learned. And then I'm going to be going through some of the key questions I think it's important to answer about undergraduate tutors. So why they make great tutors whilst they're still undergraduates, what actually motivates them to tutor, and how we as prospective organisations hoping to attract their talent, what we can do to encourage them to either work or volunteer with us. Then to discuss some of those fears that I mentioned at the very start, so some of those potential problems that undergraduate tutors might bring, and really I hope to dispel those fears, to demonstrate that they're really often slightly unfounded, and actually a lot of the things that people fear are problems with undergraduate tutors are really their great benefits. And then finally, there'll be plenty of time for sort of any questions or thoughts that people might have. So that's the plan. I can't imagine we'll last a full hour, but we will kind of soldier on and see how far we get, depending on the sort of length of discussions that we end up having. So I guess first of all, it will make sense to introduce my own background in tutoring. So I had been a tutor for a number of years, really actually from when I was taking my GCSEs right through sort of my A-levels and dabbled a little bit while I was at university. So I'd always kind of been a tutor. Never received tutoring myself, interestingly, but had always kind of delivered tutoring to people who lived around me. And then the coronavirus pandemic hit at the start of 2020. And one thing that became instantly very clear to me was that a lot of young people were going to miss out on a lot of face-to-face education. And this was really going to disproportionately hit disadvantaged young people, because those who were more advantaged and had parents who could afford private tuition would maybe be able to access a lot of private tuition straight away, whereas there was going to be a lot of disadvantaged young people who weren't going to be able to access that tuition. So having spoken to a lot of my friends, because I was still in university at the time, I knew that a lot of them were going to be sort of twiddling their thumbs a lot because they'd also been sent home from university. So it seemed there was a natural synergy there between those slightly bored undergraduates and those sort of slightly younger students who are really in need of greater academic support. So I married the two, and the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative was born. So within about 4 hours of the Prime Minister announcing that schools were going to close, we had launched a website for the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative, and tutors could express interest. So the same evening that the announcement was made, you could already sign up. And what was originally intended to be quite a small initiative that was going to help a couple of schools in my local area, very quickly snowballed into something that had sort of national attention and impact. So within about 48 hours, we had 3,500 volunteers sign up. And by the end of the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative, about 18 months later, we'd had 4,500 tutors who'd delivered tutoring on our scheme. So you can see there that little graph, which sort of demonstrates our relatively sort of impressive growth, I suppose, from kind of March through to June of 2020. So you see there that we hit kind of 10,000 hours within about 3 months, I think, and then we went on to achieve sort of 50 and a little bit over 50,000 hours in the 18 months that we were operating. So a really exciting time, and yeah, a very steep gradient, it can be noted, Ludo, but you know, really good fun, and I think really enabled me and all of the team at the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative to really understand what motivates undergraduate tutors and how organisations can really engage them and benefit from their own sort of unique experiences. So that's what the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative taught me, I suppose. And then moving on from CTI, and as I was sort of graduating from university, a new charity was born, which is the one that I now work for, which is Tutor the Nation. So we're taking all of those amazing learnings from Tutor the Nation, and really specifically that learning that undergraduates make absolutely fantastic tutors, and we're funneling it into this really new and exciting charity. So we're offering, as you can see here, completely free online tutoring to young people right across the United Kingdom. So we're working with 25 schools now, from up in Bolton all the way down to schools in sort of Oxfordshire and Greater London. So really all over the place. And all of the tutoring we deliver is entirely online, which is kind of enabling us to reach young people all over the place, wherever they may be. So not just concentrated in metropolitan areas where there might be universities, but really anywhere that young people need the support, we can reach them. And we've been operating now since November 2020. So we've got over a year's worth of experience now working with these undergraduates. And we've now got volunteers from, I think, over 50 universities. So really sort of a wide range of different universities and different backgrounds, those volunteers that we work with. So again, really giving us a good idea of what it takes to involve and benefit from these undergraduates. So it's basically based on those learnings that I'm hoping to talk to you today. And I'm going to talk you through, as I mentioned in the agenda, just a few of those key questions about undergraduates, really. And there'll be a chance for some discussion if people sort of fancy it. So first of all, I think the first thing to discuss really is what makes undergraduates great tutors. So why should we Why should we encourage undergraduates to become tutors of their organisations, and what benefits do they bring that perhaps other tutors from other different backgrounds might not bring? So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts to kick things off.
Yeah, I mean, I think their proximity to their own days of learning is a fairly central one, isn't it, Jacob? Is that something that you've noted amongst the undergrads you work with?
For sure, yeah, that's definitely one of the key benefits that we often talk about is it's that rapport and that understanding. Exams and exam boards are constantly changing and shifting their requirements and what they need from pupils. So it's really useful when you have a volunteer who, has sort of, just been through that experience. They really get it. They really understand what it's like to study those exams. So I think that's a key thing, Ludo, really, is that very close sort of age proximity, and there's that real sense of understanding. Any other thoughts from anybody?
But also, isn't it? So I think the exam boards one is a massive one. But also, it's just that having that relatability to the processes and the kind of, I guess, the pressures that you go through when you're revising in school, whatever age you are, you lose that once you become, a kind of adult in the working world, don't you? You kind of, the process of building towards exams and revising is something that you lose slightly, and probably, already just yourself and I, Jacob, have probably lost that to some extent, even only being out of formal education for a short while, but that must make a big difference as well, no?
Yeah, definitely. I think I find even I'm tutoring 2 GCSE maths students at the moment with Tutor for Nation. And I'm sort of quite scarily on the upper end of a lot of the tutors that we have with Tutor for Nation, which makes me feel very old. But yeah, and even now for me, looking back and thinking, how on earth did I do 21 exams for GCSEs? It's a terrifying number. And even now I'm struggling to sort of remember back to that. So if you have those tutors that are closer in age, you're right, they can really understand that idea. And I think Andrea as well has said in the chat about that, is that relatability and that understanding, I think is really, really key. And the energy as well, Shota, you're right. I think, without wishing to be too sort of stereotypical, young people do have that sort of energy and enthusiasm about the subject. And that's something we're really keen on sort of promoting at Tutor for Nation, is that it's not just about the improvement in grades, it's also about that passion and that enthusiasm for why you're learning. Because especially over the last 18 months, a lot of young people have really missed out on that. And now even that they're back to school, a lot of the focus in school has to be just catching up on all the content that they've missed. So what we're doing with Tutor for Nation is just giving them that time to think and to enjoy the subject a little bit more, and give them an hour to have the space to just enjoy what they're learning. So I think definitely the enthusiasm and the energy are really, really key. And yeah, Andrea, again, kind of appreciating how the pupil feels too. That sort of emotional connection, I think, is really, really important. And on the kind of responding differently, I guess I'll move forward to our learnings from our experience here. I think building up a rapport with a university student is often a lot easier for these pupils, especially for the pupils that Tutor for Nation works with. We work with a lot of disadvantaged young people. And for them, this experience can be really, really strange, sitting down and working with a tutor for an hour a week. For any young person, it's a bit of an odd experience. And having someone who's that little bit closer to you in age, I think, just makes it easier to build up that relationship, because of all those ideas of relatability and energy and compassion that we've already talked about. I think that rapport that you build up is almost sort of unmatched, is what I've said there. And I think, again, we've said already that the familiarity with course content as well is a huge, huge bonus. Like I say, it's just shifting and changing constantly. So having recently experienced that, I think it's really, really useful. And finally, as well, I think one side that we haven't discussed very much is on the practical side of sort of scheduling lessons and sorting things out. University students are pretty flexible when it comes to their timetables and things, which means that there is that flexibility to scheduling lessons and things, which makes it easier when working with pupils. Again, that's something we see with Tutor for Nation, where some of the young people we work with have to receive their tutoring while they're in school, because that's the only time that they'll really show up and engage. And some of them it has to be after school or weekends. And really, because we're working with those university students who are very, very flexible, we can really find a time that works for the pupil. So the key takeaways here, really, for why undergraduates are great tutors is that flexibility that relatability, and I think their familiarity with the course content. Those are the three, I think, key words to take away: flexibility, relatability, and familiarity are the three big things. And they're things that we see time and time again when we speak to the pupils and the teachers that we work with, that they really, really appreciate. They really appreciate that, having that person who's quite similar to them in age, who really, really understands what they're going through. It's really great. And we've received sort of, amazing stories from pupils who've really found that beneficial. Students who are sort of struggling with their Spanish or their French and are suddenly working with university tutors who are on their year abroad and are speaking to them from Cuba or Paris and teaching them Spanish from those amazing places. And it's just an incredible experience that they wouldn't get. We've heard from teachers that we're working with students who previously, they live in Bolton and the furthest they've been is sort of Manchester for day trips. And they're speaking to, university students who are in London or Oxford or Cambridge, and just showing them that there are those options out there is, I think, hugely, hugely beneficial. And yes, Ludo, if you are in Cuba or Paris, you get to show off your lovely location, which is probably a lot more exciting than the sort of London office that I'm currently sat in, unfortunately. Cool, okay, let's move on to my sort of second discussion point, I suppose, which is, we've talked about the benefits for the pupils and what that provides for the pupils and us as organisations. Why is tutoring great for the undergraduates? And also, how can we motivate the undergraduates to volunteer or to work for our organisation? Does anyone have any thoughts for this one?
Well, I've always thought that giving them, I think, what's the word, advice, kind of, ironically, giving them flexibility in their work is something that would motivate them. So it's not just flexible because an undergraduate schedule is flexible, but actually that's a motivation for a undergraduate to get involved in tutoring, let's say, not necessarily another job that young people tend to get into.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's sort of one of the perfect student jobs, really, because you can just perfectly fit it in. If you're working in a cafe or in a pub or whatever, you sort of have to fit around whatever's going on in that cafe or pub, whereas with tutoring, you really can just build it around your schedule. So it's a fantastic opportunity to make, if you're doing it for money, then to make a bit of money. If you're volunteering, to really make a big impact and fit it very neatly around what else you're up to. And a lot of other really great things in the chat. I think the key one to take away is that work experience side that a couple of people have mentioned. It's great for that future employability and those CV skills. One of the things we really try and impress on our undergraduate tutors is it demonstrates so many different skills that are hugely in demand by employers. It's the communication skills, it's the leadership skills, it's the problem solving skills. So many skills that you draw upon when you're a fantastic tutor. And being able to point to these young people that you've helped and that you've impacted is just an amazing way to provide evidence for that and to show that you've learned those things. It's really, really important. And as well, we talk about confidence in public speaking. Absolutely, those skills which employers are kind of time and time again saying they want to see more in the sort of the graduating population. They want to see more students with that sort of the confidence and the ability to stand up and speak, and really working with a young person is an ideal way to develop that. And the idea of them sort of being open to training and able to pick things up quickly, I think that's very true. And as well, for the undergraduates, it means they do get a bit of training if they're working for an organisation that does give them that training. So in terms of the learnings I think we found from Tutor the Nation, I think, Ludo, exactly what you said, they love the flexibility. Whenever we emphasize this to a kind of a volunteer who's a little bit unsure whether they've got the time, the number one sort of concern we have when we ask someone to volunteer with us is, well, I'd like to help, but I'm quite busy at university and I've got lots of things on. And we say, actually, it's just the most flexible thing you can do. All you have to do is just find that 1 hour, 2 hours a week, and you can make a huge difference and it fits in. So that flexibility, if you're sort of trying to convince undergraduates to work with you or to volunteer with you, the number one thing you can do really is emphasize that flexibility because it's hugely, hugely important. I think the second thing is that tutoring isn't a one-way street for these undergraduates. They're learning a lot too. And it's not just those skills that we've already mentioned, the confidence in the public speaking. It's actually also the skills in the subject as well. Because if you're still learning chemistry and you're tutoring A-level chemistry, it's encouraging you to go back to those subjects and reapproach them in different ways. because you have to try and understand them in different ways in order to communicate them to a pupil who might have a slightly different learning style. So it really encourages you to become, 100% confident on those things that you're learning. I've definitely found with GCSE maths, which I thought naively that I was a hotshot in. I thought, I have absolutely no problems tutoring GCSE maths. I did GCSE maths, did A-level maths, did A-level further maths, no problems at all. Boy, was I wrong, because you discover that you have your own, your own understanding of the subject, but then you need to build up that really holistic and wide view of the subject in order to be able to tutor it. And a lot of our tutors do get in contact and say that. They say that it's really helped them in their own studies. So definitely as well something to mention to tutors who might be looking to get involved. And then finally, I think I've already talked about this really, is that employability. It's using it as a way to demonstrate your sort of wide array of skills. And it's, I think another way that we sort of convince people to kind of volunteer with us are those sort of references, and we're happy to provide certificates and things like that. And undergraduates really like that. They're entering a very, very crowded job market, especially after the last kind of 18 months, 2 years. So anything that they can find to sort of set them ahead and demonstrate these skills is excellent, and even more excellent if they can do so in a way that's also made an impact to the life of a young person. So yeah, lots of reasons really why it's a great idea for undergraduates.
Jacob, I wanted to ask a question actually. Have you seen any, would you have any insights into this idea that by being a young tutor, an undergraduate tutor, and working with students, children, our young people, sorry, are you able? Does that then create? I mean, perhaps it's too early to tell. Tutor Nation, you've only been there for what is that? Just under kind of 18 months, but is that creating more tutors? By having a young tutor work with a young student, does that then reinforce to that student that tutoring is an option?
For sure, I think it really is. Yeah, I think this is something I talked about briefly. Those of you who are in the panel that I was talking on Tuesday, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but I spoke a little bit about how, yeah, exactly. It's a cycle of tutoring really, in that often in some disadvantaged communities, tutoring isn't seen in a particularly positive light. It's seen as something that you only receive if you're struggling or falling behind in the subject, as a sort of last resort. And what we can do really by providing these young people with tutors is demonstrating actually it's something that's A, really cool, B, really beneficial, and a huge honour and a huge privilege to get that tutoring and to get that one-on-one attention. So I think you're absolutely right, Ludo. It does kind of encourage them to realise that in the future they could do it. And it's definitely something we're very interested in doing at Tutor the Nation. And we're going to have our first crop of sort of graduating pupils come May, June, July. And we've got a really huge number of them who have offers to go to university or go on to further study. And we've got our fingers and toes crossed that they're going to come back and support some pupils, and hopefully from their own school as well, because I think that's a really powerful message. If we can have people who've graduated from a school, gone on to Oxford, Cambridge, all these amazing universities, and then come back and tutor people from their own school. And yes, Andrew, we're doing all we can to spread the word. So if you know a school or know a university who you think needs to know about us, then please do send us through. And we're kind of always keen to work with more schools. So I think the final point for discussion is the one that I mentioned at the beginning, which is the idea that there might be issues that undergraduate tutors bring, and how can we sort of address those issues. So any thoughts on this one? Any kind of potential roadblocks or stumbling blocks to working with undergraduates?
I think it ties in probably a little bit to what we were talking about earlier. Was it earlier today? Yeah, I think it was earlier today in the kind of discussion around school-led tutoring. And so it was Johnny Manning in the roundtable actually earlier today in the NTP roundtable. He was talking about how when Manning's tutors first started out, their tutors would sign up for a kind of block of tutoring. This was back in kind of 2015, 16. His undergraduate tutors would sign up for a block of tutoring, and then their exams would come around, and they'd have to stop the tutoring. They'd have to focus on their own studies. And I think that's very much the same issue that is present here, is it not, Jacob? That that they are still doing their own exams often.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I've said here, can flexibility backfire? Because if you advertise the fact that the joy of tutoring is that it's super flexible. I don't think you can then be surprised when, tutors sort of use it somewhat flexibly. So I think one of the things that we do is we impress that, look, it fits into your schedule, but once you've fitted it into your schedule, you need to then stick with it. Because it's actually really, really important for a young person that you have consistent sessions, because that's what's really going to make the difference. And you're right, it's often not ideal that sort of university exams map almost perfectly onto when year 11s and year 13s have their exams. They're both busy at the same time. Although I think what we're finding, which is actually quite useful, is that they can sort of help in the lead up, and then when the exams are actually happening, often the pupils don't want much tutoring sort of bang on the night before, because often that kind of tutoring is not particularly helpful, because it's often just kind of leading into nerves and cramming, which isn't often very useful. So the timings are sort of perfect in that they can both sort of prepare together and then go off and do their exams and potentially sort of reconvene after to discuss how they've gone. I think the other thing that's sort of discussed there is sort of the relationship line and clear boundaries. I think this is definitely something to sort of be aware of, and it's definitely something for safeguarding. It's very, very important to be aware of that. There is that close proximity in age, and I'll talk about that in a second and what we think at Tutor for the Nation, what we've discovered. And yeah, too much chopping and changing. I think that is very true, and that's why, like I say, we impress that it's great because it can fit around your schedule, but you do need to kind of commit. And I think tutors really understand that, because they understand the benefit for these young people is having that regular session, having that 1 hour a week that they can rely on, especially after the last 18 months of, so much, everything sort of in flux. It's great to have that, 5 p.m. on a Thursday, I meet my tutor and we spend an hour working on English. It's really beneficial. And yeah, Andrew, we've had some experience of that where, tutors are revising and they're sort of sharing their study tips and what they're up to with their pupils. And it's often really, really beneficial. It's, how are you revising? Well, I'm doing X, Y, Z. Why don't you try those? And they might help you. It's a really, really good idea.
I had exactly the same thing recently. Actually, I was living in Berlin for about 3 months just before Christmas, and didn't really speak much German. And I was tutoring coincidentally, I was tutoring a German child online, but I was tutoring him in French. I was teaching him French. So at the same time, we were learning the same processes that you have to go through to pick up a language, writing down all the words you hear, making sure you kind of go over them the next day or the kind of couple of days later to reinforce them, talking about confidence in speaking, that kind of thing. And I'll be honest, he was much quicker at learning French than I was at German. So I often felt like he was tutoring me. But yeah, great point, Andrea.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in terms of our learnings here, I think I've already discussed here, it's striking that balance between flexibility and commitment, right? It needs to become an embedded part of your timetable. And I think the undergraduates we work with really do understand that and respect that, because they see the benefits when they're working with those young people. I think, sometimes people are a little bit concerned about lack of experience in tutoring or lack of experience with the subject material. I think what I'd say is what's true for undergraduates, and I'm sure it's probably true for anyone really, is that they have the foundations to be fantastic tutors, because they have that experience themselves very recently. They've been through the exams, they've made it to the next step of their educational journeys. So really, they just need that bit of support. They need a bit of training just to kind of get them going, and then they'll be excellent. And then the final thing about that professionalism, I think what we find is that the age gap is often sometimes minimal. So there might be sort of a year, 2, 3 years in between the tutor and the pupil, but the maturity gap is often sort of huge, really, because there is a huge maturity gap between someone who's even in year 12 or 13 and someone who's gone off to university. And often I think that kind of gives them that distance, that you need that professional distance. But obviously, as with any sort of tutoring organisation, you should be monitoring and checking in just for your own sort of safeguarding, but it's definitely not something that we find to be a particular problem. And we often just find the benefits are there, the benefits of building the rapport more than sort of the drawbacks, I suppose. So those are my 3 discussion points that we have sort of stormed through in record time, as it were. I think a few sort of conclusions and overall thoughts that I'll share to sort of round things off, and then there'll be some time for discussion if anyone has any thoughts. I think the first thing, and what I've hoped to impress throughout this session, is that undergraduates are an amazing resource. And then we found after the last 2 years that, the undergraduates that we've worked with have delivered, 51,000 hours of completely free tuition. They've they haven't been paid a penny for that. 51,000 hours, we reckon to a value of probably somewhere between £1.5 and £2 million. And they've just done that because they genuinely care about the education of the generation behind them. So it's just incredible. And they've demonstrated to us in doing that they have those sort of rapport building skills and the recent experience to make amazing empathetic tutors. So they're definitely worth the chance because they demonstrated that they're sort of passionate and confident enough to do this. And there's also an awful lot of them. So it's a really good resource to kind of work into, because there's a lot of undergraduates all over the place who are looking for either that extra bit of spare cash or a bit of sort of volunteering to do. I think the second thing, and again something that I've spoken about, is that they have a lot to gain too. And therefore I think it's important that we make sure that they are given the support with kind of CV building, and ongoing training. And that's really, really important. If you're hiring or working with these people who are in the very early stages of their either academic or professional careers, it's really important that you make sure that it's a two-way street and that they're learning and developing too. And that's absolutely crucial. And then the final thing is just start working with undergraduates. I think it's well worth it. Your pupils will thank you because they'll have a brilliant time with them, and so will your parents, guardians and schools. We're really finding over the last 18 months that it makes a fantastic difference, and they're really kind of well received by the pupils that they work with. Okay, so that kind of leaves us plenty of time for sort of questions and thoughts if anyone has them. I saw there was a couple about sort of students on a contract and whether they're self-employed. So for us, because all of our volunteers are just volunteers, and we don't have the need for any contracts or things like that. So it's not something that I have direct experience of, I'm afraid, because they're just volunteers with us. But happy to answer any other questions. And yes, Andrea, volunteers are welcome if they're at any university in the UK. We also do accept any sort of graduates or experienced tutors. So if you are interested, then you're more than welcome to head onto our website, and we'd love to have you. How do you entice people into volunteering over paid tutoring? Yeah, absolutely. I think the key way that we always discuss this is that we're not asking people to choose between them. So we have a lot of people who do a lot of paid tutoring, and then we say, why not for every couple of hours of paid tutoring that you do as a student, why don't you take an hour to do some volunteer tutoring? So it's definitely not a choice between them. And really, if you're doing that paid tutoring, then you're going to be a brilliant help as a volunteer tutor. So it's definitely not an either or. And as well, I think people really do recognise, and what we're really trying to communicate is that there is a huge problem of educational inequality in the UK, a massive, massive gap. Before the pandemic, disadvantaged students were often 18 months behind their more advantaged peers by the time they took their GCSEs. So a year and a half of academic progress behind, and that was before the pandemic. And we've now had 3 years, or sort of 2 years, whatever, of pandemic level conditions. The kind of wide studies on that, the impacts of that haven't been seen yet, but we're fairly sure it's not going to be good. So these students need every help they can get, or every bit of help they can get, sorry. So I think, the university students we work with really do understand that and are willing to get involved. Can post A-level students apply? It's useful for us if they have a university email address, just because it's, for our safeguarding, it's great to have that university email address. But if we have a particularly keen post A-level student, then worth dropping us an email and we can see what we can do, because we're never going to sort of turn away a tutor who is enthusiastic. On that point, Colette, so they wouldn't advertise to students unless they're contracted. Yeah, I mean, I think different universities have different approaches to this, and some universities run their own very successful schemes, so it often depends on the university. So sort of worth approaching different universities if you're interested, because there are universities who are very, very keen to help with this kind of thing. And what age do you tutor children? So we work with GCSE and A-level students. So from sort of year 9, year 10 through to year 13 is our current age range. We are very well aware that one of the key turning points really in the education of a lot of disadvantaged young people is year 6 to year 7. It's that transition and making sure that transition goes well. So it's something we're looking towards in future, because we're aware that we're finding, especially with a lot of boys, that is often where they lose interest in education, and it's very difficult to get it back by the time you've got to GCSEs and A-levels. So I think at some point in the future, without wishing to kind of commit us to anything, I think we will start looking towards that younger age group because we think that could be really beneficial as well. And we also know there's lots of tutors who feel more comfortable helping with that age range who would be a really brilliant support.
Jacob, what do you class as an undergraduate tutor, kind of upwards, not looking down to post A level, but I know you kind of already briefly alluded to this, but how far past university can an undergraduate tutor be?
Yeah, so we take any sort of graduate or experienced tutor as well, so there's no limit. We actually also have a lot of retired teachers who volunteer with us, who are sort of retired now and just want to do a couple of hours a week to help out. So there is no upper age limit. The majority of people we work with are university students just because we have great partnerships with universities right across the country, but there really is no limit, and we're sort of always very happy to have you. And it's all one-to-one tutoring, all one-to-one. And the UCAS website is a good idea, and I will look into it because it's not something we've thought about. I don't know if they have a sort of volunteering portal. But yeah, it's all one-to-one tuition.
Maybe you're legally bound not to answer this question, Jacob, but obviously that there are charities who offer volunteer tutoring who are working as part of the NTP. Is that something that you've been approaching schools with or approaching the supplier with?
No, I think we're quite happy with what we're currently doing. I think we provide something quite unique because obviously we're not charging the schools, which I think means that we can sort of perfectly complement what schools are already doing with their national tutoring program provision and the funding they have for that. So what we're sometimes finding, for example, is that schools will put a certain portion of their students onto the national tutoring program provision. So for example, they might put those students who are really at risk of dropping out, who've sort of lost interest in education over the last few years, and then we might be helping their students who are looking towards Oxbridge and medicine. So there's definitely sort of space for lots of support. There's sort of, far too many really disadvantaged young people who are really in need of this support. But no, at the moment, we're sort of doing our own thing separate to the NTP, and I think that will remain the case. What's the most difficult part of getting Tutor the Nation started? I think our big difficulty is always volunteers, volunteers, volunteers. As I've just said, there are lots of pupils and lots of schools who would benefit from what we do, and it's just finding as many volunteers as we can. So that's sort of the thing that keeps me up at night and has done ever since I started working on Tutor the Nation, is how do we find more amazing volunteers who will help change your life? It's my constant pursuit, really, and doing all we can to make that happen, I guess. In terms of contact information, yes, I do, Andrea. My email address is on there if you have any further thoughts, and you can also pop us a follow on our socials if you'd like to keep up to date with what we're up to.
Jacob, I've got a question that hopefully will allow you to dream big and open your mind. Just looking ahead then, I mean, you've told us a lot about the history of where Tutor the Nation came from, obviously CTI and how that all began. But can you cast your mind forward a little bit? What would success look like for you by the end of this year, by the end of next year? I presume that you're sticking around to Tutor the Nation for the foreseeable future.
Yep. Yeah, we're definitely here to stay. And I always feel slightly guilty when people ask me this question because we don't have some sort of like grand plan of all these new things we're going to do. Our plan is just help more pupils. While there are still more pupils that need this kind of support, we will just continue to provide it. We're not going to kind of stretch into mentoring or into university access. We just keep pushing ahead with what we're doing because we know it works and we know it makes a difference. So just more schools, more pupils and more universities, and just keep doing that. I think this year is going to be an exciting year for us. We're launching our own sort of tech platform, which is going to make everything sort of drag us kicking and screaming into the 21st century with a really cool innovative tech platform that we've developed to really suit our needs. And also we're going to be rebranding very soon. So we're going to have lots of sort of shiny new color schemes and things, which is very exciting. So hopefully a sort of exciting relaunch this year, lots of press attention, and then just doing as much as we can to reach more pupils. I'm sorry, I know it's not a particularly exciting answer, but it's just the goal.
More of the same, please.
Yeah.
So
of course.
Yeah. So have you found that the kind of, a bit more personally, have you found that the role of obviously founding the CTI, and then that being kind of not a project that went on and on, that it ran its course, and then it kind of fed straight into Tutor the Nation, and perhaps these things, you never knew what was going to happen when you put that LinkedIn post out, and even now in January 2022, you don't know what's going to happen by the end of this academic year or this calendar year. How is the role of kind of you're talking now about building out, having a rebranding, talking to the press? How has that role changed for you, as from someone who just put a LinkedIn post out to someone who's now running this a big operation?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. It's definitely been a roller coaster, and definitely a lot of learning curves. And I think as well with Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative, there was about 60 of us working on the central team, and all of us just learning so much so quickly, and really still learning a lot every day. It's only been sort of 9 months since I finished at uni, so it's been a lot of picking up on new things. But it's just been a really great privilege, and so amazing every time we hear from a pupil or from a teacher who says that it's made a difference. It sort of makes it all worth it. It makes all those sort of very, very often very steep learning curves worth it, I think, and all those sort of crazy nights of hard work. It's been great. Yeah, it's taken me all over the place. It's been great fun.
Yeah. Well, perfect, Rachel.
Yes, we do tutor 16 to 19-year-olds, Rachel, absolutely. And we know that as well, they're a group that there is some provision within the National Tutoring Programme, but not an awful lot of provision. So a lot of the schools we work with are very keen for us to work with their A-level students, which is something that we very enthusiastically do. Great. No worries at all.
Yeah, I think if there are any more questions, and obviously please do pop them in, but Jacob's done a fantastic job of not only taking us through the history of Tutor the Nation, and obviously, as we mentioned, CTI as well, but also I think of opening the minds of our small, intimate audience here this evening, but a much larger audience, I'm sure, on demand, who will be catching this after the festival, because it's the place that you look to when you look for scalability and growth, and the future of tutoring is you look at the young. I mean, we traditionally look at the young because the students are the eventual and the most important part of tutoring, but this, I think, is tying into looking at younger members of the tutoring market as the people who will drive it in the future. Plenty of people who have tutors when they're children won't be involved in the tutoring industry when they become adults. But I think it's about, as Sholto mentioned earlier, that the cycle of tutoring is no bad thing if the tutoring that is being done is ethical and sustainable and accessible. So Jacob, I think you're going to have quite a few people reaching out to you after this, and perhaps finding some undergraduates in all of our lives a nice bit of work to keep them motivated, keep them interested, keep them inspired, and hopefully get them into tutoring if that's not something they're already in. So a huge thank you, Jacob. I know that that was probably not the event that you had planned in its entirety, but I think you've done a wonderful job of answering kind of all of those questions there.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to those of you who are getting involved in the chat. It was great, thank you.
Yeah, we've just got a short video to show you from general partners of the festival, LearnCube, and then after that we will be wrapping up here, and in about 10 minutes time we have our final event of day 4, which will be a late night live, our final also late night live podcast with the Remedy recruitment team, who were sponsors of day 1 at the festival, and who do again, just as Jacob and Tutor the Nation do, pretty fantastic work helping those children who have been most disadvantaged by the pandemic, but also in Remedy Recruitment's case, have been doing it for a number of years. So we'll be hearing from Dean, Craig, and Daniel Sugarman from Remedy in about 10 minutes time, but just a short video from LearnCube first.
Are you looking for a professional online classroom? LearnCube is an easy, affordable solution, purpose-built for live online education. We offer so much more than just reliable video conferencing. Get on the same page with your students using our multi-tab whiteboard. Upload and save class materials to your own lesson library for future use. You can upload PDFs, video or audio files, or even load a YouTube video to play, pause, or skip ahead. Both student and teacher can annotate on top of lesson materials, or even using our advanced screen share feature. Your materials are saved automatically at the end of the class. They can be accessed for review or reloaded to pick up where you left off. Schedule with ease and access reports on past classes. Make LearnCube's classroom your classroom. It's a snap to add your own logo and change the color scheme to match your brand. LearnCube is download free, so students can easily connect with their computer, tablet or smartphone. For individual or group classes, LearnCube really is the perfect all-in-one online teaching solution. Sign up for a free 14-day trial of the Pro plan today by clicking on the link in the description or visiting learncube.com.
So thank you very much for that. And if you go into the Love Tutoring Festival hub in our community, there's actually a very special Love Tutoring Festival only offer for LTF attendees from LearnCube. It's a free subscription to the platform for a limited amount of time. So it's very generous offer there from the whole Alex Asher, the CEO of LearnCube, and the rest of his team. But Jacob, one final huge thank you to you for speaking to us this evening about a topic that perhaps some of us were less than knowledgeable about and now are much more in tune with it and inspired by it. So a huge thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we will, as Sholto says, we will be seeing you at LTF3 in one capacity or another. But yes, we are going to be wrapping up here, and then we'll see you for our final event of the evening in about just under 10 minutes time.